Welcome to the entire Modern Warfare Zombies storyline explained. I aim for this video to be the most in-depth video on YouTube. With the Modern Warfare Zombies story finally concluding, I wanted to make a video summarizing absolutely everything that's happened in this game and all of the possible implications it could have for Black Ops 6, which is of course right around the corner. Unfortunately, similar to Vanguard, Modern Warfare 3 Zombies leaves us with a lot more questions than answers, a lot of which will likely be answered in Black Ops 6, but I think many will be left for future games too. It seems there were some issues or conflicts in development, seeing as Treyarch stepped off of the project just a couple months after release to focus on Black Ops 6, with Sledgehammer seemingly having to weave story missions around likely ready-made cutscenes. As a result, some areas, both story and gameplay-wise, were not able to be fully executed as intended, and can explain why some beats quickly become irrelevant or are even ignored completely. With that said, the game is still very important in understanding what comes next, both in terms of the past with Black Ops 6 and moving forward into the future game story post Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. The game leaves us on a big cliffhanger for what's to come.
Ava! Ava!
Before we can discuss the ending and what it means for the future of the Dark Ether storyline and all of the ramifications that come along with it, we need to look back at everything that led up to this conclusion, starting with the beginnings of the Modern Warfare Zombies story. Our story begins in the 90s, where we are introduced to many of our characters we would go on to see decades later.
There's a place just round the bend. A place by the name of Liberty Falls.
During her childhood, Crystal Miller was a resident of Liberty Falls, a small town in West Virginia where she lived with her parents and attended school. On February 18th, 1991, following recess, a fire drill was sounded and Crystal, alongside her classmates, were quickly escorted out of the school to evacuate from the town. Crystal, unaware of what was going on, could only follow her parents' order and focused on running. Unfortunately, Crystal's father was attacked by a zombie horde during this sprint and was ultimately left behind by Crystal and her mother, who just kept running. The two of them eventually found a fire escape, but Crystal's mother was quickly swarmed by another zombie horde, leaving Crystal to run away on her own. 3 days after the outbreak, a local biker gang, the Steel Mountain Riders, found Crystal huddled up inside a Freedom Fried Chicken restaurant and took her to safety. On February 23rd, Crystal was interviewed on her traumatic experience by Project Janus security chief John Blanchard. Being just 5 years old, she did her best to recount the events. Afterwards, she was adopted by her aunt and uncle. While this was going on, New Zealand resident Jack Fletcher joined the New Zealand Defence Forces at some point in 1989, serving until 1990. Sometime in 1991, he was seconded by the Central Intelligence Agency to operate under the 1 New Zealand SES Regiment for Terminus Island security detail. He was honourably discharged post-mission in 1993. It is unclear if he served during or after our Terminus crew escaped the island amidst Black Ops 6. The most important relevance in the introduction to Modern Warfare 3 is with the birth of Ava, who was conceived by Requiem for a currently unknown reason as the biological daughter of Samantha Maxis and Sergei Ravenov, using their DNA samples taken from them with or without their consent, with Elizabeth Gray acting as the surrogate mother who carried and gave birth to her in 1993. At the very moment she was born, a mysterious entity spawned in the Dark Ether. The Dark Ether seemingly cloned Ava, creating a dark shadow of herself due to their mother Samantha Maxis' strong connection to the realm, essentially acting as her twin sister of sorts. Ava was cared for by Gray and presumably the other Requiem leads for 3 years. By then, Gray and the others were slowly dying due to their long-term Ethereum exposure. At some point before, the characters attempted to save Samantha Maxis from the Dark Ether, but ultimately failed, with some taking the loss harder than others. Before the Ethereum would kill them, as of 1996, long after their escape on Terminus Island, it was decided that Ava would be handed off to a now adoptive parents, a couple of ex-New Zealand National Intelligence agents, the Jansons, while it was decided that Ravenov would keep watching over her from afar, seeing as he has direct ties with her. A device is built to sacrifice their lives and give up their dark ether essence before they die anyways to create 4 vials of highly enriched Ethereum. Before doing so, Gray records a message for Ava on August 15th, 1996, in which she details her true origins, while wishing that some part of Ava will remember Gray after she is gone, this message to be given to her when the time is right. For some reason, the Requiem leads end up in Zaravan, Urzikstan. Weaver, Gray, Carver and Strauss all sacrifice themselves, whether willingly, partially or not, to this device powering 4 Ethereum canisters where their corpses remain rotting for decades. In this room are many zombie artifacts, such as the Monkey Bomb, Cerberus Wonder Weapon, perk cans, 1 field upgrades, and more. They die, just as the Forsaken predicted, before he was trapped at the end of Black Ops Cold War. In the years that followed Operation First Domino, Ravenov would essentially be a ghost in the shell, with the new Russian government having no record of him existing. While the specifics of his activity after 1985 to Modern Warfare 3 are unknown, he has stated that he acted as a mob enforcer while he kept watch of Ava from a distance. This was a dark period for his life. In the years that followed, he began wondering if he's lived for too long. Ava would go on living her life unaware of her real parents' identities until 2006, when she had a blood test during biology class and found out that her DNA did not match that of the Jansens. She went home, desperately trying to find her birth certificate, only to stumble upon CD-ROMs marked with Gray's name, as well as a photo of Gray which triggered a faint memory in Ava's mind. To learning from her adoptive parents that Gray left her in their care and never came back, Ava was distraught with anger and resentment, and tried to avoid learning more about Gray by focusing on studying physics, but the obsession kept creeping back. She had to learn more, and soon became fascinated with Gray's work on something known as Ethereum, and in understanding her struggles under Requiem, became less resentful of her. Instead, she was driven to exceed her mother in her own field. Throughout her life, the entity repeatedly attempted to reach out to her sister, but full connection could not be made due to the dimensional barriers between their worlds. Jansen also began taking schizophrenia pills to suppress visions, dreams, and hallucinations from the entity's influence, being misdiagnosed. These hallucinations may have prompted some of her initial digging and knowledge on Dr. Gray's research, allowing her to have a much better understanding of the Dark Ether realm than most normal people. Starting in 2005, Fletcher worked as a mercenary for a variety of clients. His mercenary work would later expand in 2011 into his own company, Terminus Outcomes, and quickly established itself as one of the world's largest private military companies, named after his experience on Terminus Island and quite literally being the outcomes of its aftermath. The company is headquartered out of Brunei to bypass extradition treaties with the United States and has multiple training facilities located within Turkmenistan, Congo, and Uganda. Terminus Outcomes contractors are equipped with the latest weaponry and technology, and their training even rivals that of major NATO militaries. After graduation, Jansen primarily worked as a theoretical physicist. At some point, she began speaking about Ethereum publicly as a quote-unquote thought experiment, as well as speaking about the possibility of alternative dimensions. She was heavily criticized by the scientific community after publishing her talk, Ethereum, a Thought Experiment, online, which theorized that an element, Ethereum, could be provoked into radioactive decay as to release enough giga-electrovolts to pop the soap bubble to pierce the veil between adjacent dimensions and provide the world with a clean, sustainable energy source. Many dismissed her as a quack and a charlatan. Sometime after her talk was published online, she was interviewed by C. Cassidy regarding her PhD paper, Alternate Dimensions, Worlds Within Worlds, where she was asked to respond to her critics. She was quick to accuse the interviewer of being one of her said critics by forgetting to refer to her as Doctor. She would then elaborate on her beliefs, stating that historically those in power have pushed back against scientific theories contrary to popular belief, using the Catholic Church's pushback against Galileo Galilei's championing of Copernican heliocentrism as an example. News of her work eventually caught the ear of the American government, with the FBI abruptly raiding her laboratory, confiscating her research and placing her under arrest. She was held in detention for 12 days before being released. When asked by the media for an interview regarding the arrest, Jansen and her faculty staff failed to respond. Taking a detour, during the war zone in Verdansk, Kostovia 2020, Russian ultranationalist and wanted terrorist Viktor Zakhaev used the tensions between the coalition and the allegiance to power up all the bunkers in Verdansk without realizing it, allowing him to activate the intercontinental ballistic missile silo hidden within Bunker 10. His plan to fulfill his late father's wishes ultimately failed, however, as Task Force 141 managed to get the abort code for the missile 6157 and launched an assault with the help of Farah, Alex, and Marcus Griggs' demon dogs in order to create a diversion. Price infiltrated Bunker 10 when Zakhaev activated the missile. Captain Price shot him in the shoulder before throwing him off to the bottom of the silo. With Zakhaev seemingly neutralized, Price received the abort code from Nikolai and prevented the ICBM from launching. Luckily for Zakhaev, thanks to some writing magic, the floor in the bunker silo was actually filled with water all along, allowing him to survive. Following his close experience with death, he began hearing rumblings of this mysterious element known as Ethereum. Task Force 141 also caught wind of these rumblings when they discovered intel on the Office of Requiem's formation from the 80s, with even the President of the United States themselves being anxious to get this show on the road. Simon Ghost Riley wrote on it, "What the hell was the Office of Requiem?" Following on from this, it seems Task Force 141 operators became more aware. Unbeknownst to Task Force 141, Zakhaev managed to survive his encounter with Price. After escaping, Zakhaev began searching for new weapons. He soon learned about Ethereum and the conflict between Requiem and Omega that ensued decades prior. It would seem as though governments and other bodies had most of their research intact, which ended up subsequently falling into the wrong hands. In 2021, he hired Terminus Outcomes, led by Jack Fletcher, to help him track and find the remaining Ethereum. All of this to avenge his father, Cold War relic Imran Zakhaev's death, stating,
I miss you, Father. You will have the legacy you deserve. I'll see to it.
with his ultimate goal and hopes being to take aim at the West. With her scientific career in disgraced shambles, Janssen was eventually recruited by Viktor Zakhaev to continue her work on Ethereum energy research, believing this was the only way to continue her work. Ignorant of his true nature, Janssen assumed he was the CEO of Terminus Outcomes, whom she was recruited by, noting to herself he didn't fit the profile of a CEO. She was told her research was needed under the guise of researching clean energy and medicine. She surmised that Zakhaev's motives went beyond simple energy research. In actuality, it was to further develop Ethereum-based weaponry. She would be proven correct after Zakhaev and Terminus Outcomes catch wind over the Ethereum vials where the Requiem heads are deceased. Later the same year, 2021, accompanied by Fletcher and a squad of his contractors, Zakhaev travels to Zaravan, Urzikstan, where they ambush a group of local police forces at an American checkpoint, creating a diversion. After breaching into a basement of a hotel, they discover a long-abandoned CIA safe house containing the mummified remains of Grigory Weaver and the 3 other corpses around a device placed on a table. They seem untouched since the 90s and are long since gone. The device opens, revealing 2 vials of highly enriched Ethereum. Zakhaev quickly reaches out to grab this cache of weapons-grade Ethereum. In disbelief, he exclaims,
"Oh, they're actually real. They're actually here."
Interestingly enough, 2 vials are now missing. Armed with these vials by his side, he and his mercs attempt to escape, but are quickly attacked by police reinforcement, including military police. As they are relentlessly shot at, almost all of his men are killed, and he is cut off from his escort. Chasing them down, the corpse of Zakhaev cornered with no options left, aside from one. He makes a quick, reckless choice and tosses one of the vials at the police. It splinters, immediately encapsulating the entire area in dark ether mist, which creates an exclusion zone that turns people, both dead and alive, into zombies, reintroducing the dark ether into our reality. The forces of the dark ether spread throughout the city, grabbing and tangling everyone caught in the mist. Fletcher watches in horror as many of his own men, both dead and wounded, turn into zombies and begin to attack each other, while Zakhaev grins in satisfaction.
Fuck. Looks like we have a weapon.
Zakhaev manages to return to the LTV with Fletcher, but takes a hit by a sniper on his way before driving off and safely leaving the area, now realizing the true effectiveness of Ethereum. Unknowingly, this allowed the entity's influence over Ava to grow, as the veil had been weakened. Operation Deadbolt was established overnight in response to the threat. Special Security Officer Selma Green was placed in charge of the operation. While picking recruits for the newly formed response unit, Green was recommended by her CIA colleague, Kate Laswell, ordered by higher-ups, to choose Sergei Ravenov, the former Spetsnaz captain who has had past dealings with similar undead incursions, and who is most relevant, acting as a familiar face for us, the last known surviving member from the Requiem era. Despite the complete lack of background information on Ravenov, Green was told to trust the recommendation by higher-ups, to which she even received a direct letter from the White House stating, "You know who I am. I hope my identity and status have been appropriately communicated to you." In another letter, they stated, "You have the entirety of my office and the Pentagon at your disposal." This implies that not only does the president themselves seemingly have a vetted interest in Deadbolt, knowing of the outbreak immediately, but that they also handpicked Ravenov specifically, and could even be, potentially, someone we know. Laswell tried to reassure her by saying, there is no one else that could fill his position. Ravenov remains merely a seasoned and mysterious veteran to everyone else around him, something constantly mentioned in the intel. He lends his expertise where he can. As the CIA created Deadbolt, Terminus Outcomes deploys contractors into the exclusion zone, where they establish a fortress overseen by the company's second-in-command, Legacy, Baranov. Fletcher and Zakhaev begin to study the Ethereum sample in their possession, with Fletcher proclaiming that they would make a killing by selling Ethereum once Zakhaev had enriched enough additional samples.
Extraction's going great. Gonna make a killing selling this Ethereum.
When I've enriched enough to make more of these, you can do as you please with the rest.
Deadbolt accrued several additional members: Captain Amy Fang, who handles infiltration and exfiltration; Captain Lucas Dobbs, more commonly referred to as just Luke, who provides drone reconnaissance; Colour Sergeant Rupinder Roops Kapoor, who provides mechanical expertise; Dr. Hugo Barrera, who studies dark ether creatures and phenomena; and Sergeant Johnny Soap McTavish, who handles field operations. Most importantly, they hire Corporal Krista Miller to handle requisitions, now grown up, who at some point joined the United States Marine Corps. Despite selection for the operation, there was concern that her past with the undead threat could affect her work. Though, following a letter sent by Miller herself to Green, those concerns were put to rest. Miller would work as the operations quartermaster, also creating audio logs to describe the more exotic threats that the strike team would encounter during the operation. It would also be during this operation that she would meet someone else experienced with these kinds of incursions, Ravenov. At one point, Ravenov learned from Miller that she experienced the Liberty Falls outbreak and promised to help her learn the truth behind it by offering to connect the dots based on what she remembered. However, they had to keep it off the books, as Miller had kept it mostly to herself throughout her life for fear of consequences and threats she received, potentially deadly. The government, of course, did not want their involvement in Liberty Falls to get out. Miller was surprised she found someone else alive who even knew of what happened and questioned why she even had to keep it to herself for so long. Miller experiences post-traumatic stress disorder due to the events she endured on Liberty Falls, and states she hates fried chicken due to her experience. But she says she is still ready to take on the threat and face the demons head-on, being someone tied since the beginning. In addition, a strike team of operators was also employed to carry out various missions in the Zaravan exclusion zone to assist other Deadbolt members. Roughly 3 weeks after the outbreak started, after receiving a briefing from Laswell, the strike team deploy in Zaravan for the first time alongside Soap and Ravenov.
By the time we worked out where he was operating, all we could do was go kinetic and hope to flush the bastard out.
One of our checkpoints reported hostile contact. Then the whole town went dark.
Until we know what's going on, containment is the name of the game. No one gets in, and nothing, I mean nothing gets out. Clear?
Ravenov here has experience with this kind of incursion.
He'll give you the lay of the land. Keep your head up and listen to him if you want to survive.
Report to SSO Green. Out here, this is her show! Welcome to Operation Deadbolt.
This is us. Let's move.
It was also at this time that Terminus Outcomes employ Ari Dockerby, who sets up a fortress in Zaravan City and begins to harass Operation Deadbolt's convoys passing through the area. Meanwhile, Zakhaev records a message to his late father, vowing to continue his legacy and strike against the West, naming Washington DC, London, and Paris as targets for his revenge. Zakhaev also learns of one of Price's protégés, Johnny Soap McTavish, working for Operation Deadbolt, and swore that he would take Soap's life as vengeance against Price for nearly killing him in Verdansk, although seeing him as kind of a brother.
I'm a patient man, Captain. I won't rest until everyone you care about is eliminated. So imagine my pleasure to find your protege, Soap McTavish, embedded with Operation Deadbolt. Losing him, that would be like losing a brother. Oh yeah, the thought of it is exhilarating.
Jake Fletcher, client conversation regarding Terminus contract 75819. Commencing.
Why are you recording?
For quality assurance.
I assume you have questions?
The shit you're after. I need to know what it does.
Ethereum? It is none of your concern.
Will it harm my men?
Yet. If they're smart, they should be fine.
Great. So, half are going home in body bags? We need to renegotiate the contract. If there's a market for this, I know people, buyers. We could stand to make a lot of money.
Money is of no concern.
Then you won't mind parting with it.
When I have enough enriched Ethereum to secure my father's legacy, you may sell whatever remains to your buyers.
As Ava Jansen learns of Zakhaev's true plan with the Ethereum that he and Fletcher have been extracting, she realizes she needs Deadbolt, as she may be the only person with the knowledge to stop the outbreak. She uses a tablet within the exclusion zone to contact them. After her tablet was found by Deadbolt operatives and decrypted by Luke Dobbs, Deadbolt would deploy boots on the ground to her coordinates. Following this event, Zakhaev ordered Fletcher to find and kill Ava Jansen, while also continuing to extract Ethereum and defend against Operation Deadbolt's assault.
She's played her part. Find her and kill her.
This prompted Terminus Outcomes mercenaries at her location to try and prevent Operation Deadbolt's strike team from extracting her, while also fighting against the zombie hordes in the area. By the time Deadbolt operatives reach her, she was already in the process of deleting her work from Terminus's servers. Accomplishing this, she and Deadbolt then fought Terminus mercenaries to a nearby helipad where they were exfiltrated by Amy Fang. Terminus Outcomes failed in preventing her extraction.
Bravo Zulu team. I have a lot of questions for Dr. Jansen, and she has a lot to answer for.
Back at the base, Jansen was interrogated by SSO Selma Green, Johnny Soap McTavish, and Ravenov about her work with Zakhaev. She told them that she had no idea that he was a terrorist when she started her work for him, and that she wanted to help Deadbolt stop his plans. Informing her interrogators that Zakhaev kept his weapons-grade Ethereum on his person at all times, she pleaded to Deadbolt to let her fix the problem she unintentionally helped start. It took some convincing, but ultimately Green agreed to have her on board. With Deadbolt's assistance, Jansen was able to craft a prototype Ethereum neutralizer. After a firefight against Terminus Outcomes and disabling a pair of SAM turrets, Deadbolt escorted an ACV containing the neutralizer across the exclusion zone to a particularly Ethereum-rich area, where they gave it a test fire. Ultimately, it was successful in destabilizing the raw, unprocessed Ethereum crystals. Unfortunately, Jansen later reveals in a post-mission briefing with Green, Soap and Ravenov, that her research concludes concludes that the neutralizer would only be effective against unprocessed Ethereum, as opposed to the weapons-grade Ethereum present in Zakhaev's vial. A frustrated Green would accuse her of failure. Jansen shot back, saying that that wasn't true and she could amplify the neutralizer's output to affect the vial using research conducted by none other than Dr. Oscar Strauss. It seems as though much of Requiem's research had been salvaged. After some debating, Green relented and ordered Deadbolt to secure Strauss's data. As the ether storm in Zaravan expanded, Jansen began to clutch her head in pain as she swallowed some schizophrenia pills. A concerned Ravenov tried to confront her and ask what was wrong, to which Jansen simply replied that it was just a migraine that would soon pass.
Ava, what is wrong?
It's just a migraine. It'll pass. They always do.
Zakhaev continued to threaten Deadbolt and ordered his troops to destroy the neutralizer. Deadbolt would soon have to raid a legacy Baranov's fortress to obtain Strauss's data. With the neutralizer complete and ready for use against Zakhaev, Deadbolt deployed to Zakhaev's Ethereum refining plant and prepared to activate the neutralizer, but were attacked by Terminus forces and later by Orcus, an ether worm that feeds on massive Ethereum Rift energy. After a lengthy battle, Jansen rushed to the neutralizer past the worm and activated it, killing it and destabilizing Zakhaev's vial and Ethereum around it. Without warning, this for some reason triggered a dark ether vortex to appear, sucking up literally everything in its wake, killing all soldiers it encapsulates. As Zakhaev stares at the vortex in horror, Fletcher warns Zakhaev that they have to leave. Unconcerned with Fletcher's warning, Zakhaev watches as his Ethereum vial destabilizes, dropping to the ground in disbelief. Fletcher then grabs Zakhaev, throwing him to safety inside a building. The vortex lifted Jansen into the air like a god with bolts of electricity, as the entity appeared before Jansen, demanding her to. She screamed in horror, fainting as the vortex closed and she floated back to the ground. Ravenov quickly rushed to help her as she opened her eyes, as they briefly glow a dark purple, just as her own mother's did. The experience seemingly left Jansen with no memory of what had just occurred, only remembering vaguely the entity that had called to her. As Zakhaev's Ethereum all became useless, the outbreak retracted momentarily before a new giant anomaly appears in the distance. It would seem as though, despite Zakhaev's vial being the cause for the initial outbreak, it weakened the veil between the worlds so much so that it now allowed Ava's connection with the entity to strengthen, further weakening the veil and allowing the entity to now take a more concrete hold on the area, explaining the continuous outbreak. The vortex that appeared could have been her desperately gaining enough power before Ethereum's collapse to open a portal and get a hold of Ava, tying her to the world. The entity begins opening dark ether rifts to Al-Mazrah, and Deadbolt are informed of a large
An energy spike in the red zone.
Following this defeat, Zakhaev once again went into hiding, leaving Terminus Outcomes to operate independently in Zaravan. This also caused a shift in direction for them, where their focus was now only on extracting the Ethereum and selling it to those who are interested in it for a profit. War efforts, medicine, whatever. Anything money can buy. Fletcher's that kind of man. Fletcher would then send an angry invoice of the whopping amount of $3.7 million in Ares to him, stating, "You owe us," for Terminus' services in the zone, stating partial payment in Ethereum is acceptable. As far as we're aware, Zakhaev likely never paid him. And this is the last we see of Zakhaev in the story. Whilst he was set up as the main villain initially, it seems that this was most likely mandated as a marketing ploy by higher-ups as a way to connect Black Ops and Modern Warfare's stories together. But Trek likely didn't want to include him. They probably already had a story outlined previously without him, and constantly had Fletcher refer to him as a bumbling idiot in the intel.
Constantly flanked by grunts and yes men on one side, and completely sus whack jobs like Zakhaev on the other. Somehow, Every last one of them is completely useless.
They then ditched him at the nearest opportunity after resurrecting him for no reason. The same goes for Soap. Following this point, he makes no other appearance in the cutscenes beyond a few radios and once again serves no purpose in the story and was ditched at the earliest opportunity. Since Modern Warfare 3 Zombies takes place in 2021, this is before his eventual death in 2023 when he's shot in the head by Makarov in the London Underground at the end of the campaign for the same game. Following the change in direction, Terminus Outcomes also employs a new commander to further reinforce their operation in Zaravan, Dr. Sonar Keres Mirzoyan, a person with a deep interest in chemical research and also a deep hatred for morality, who sets up another Terminus Outcomes fortress, this time in Orlov military base. Meanwhile, the Deadbolt team was deployed to investigate the anomaly near the high threat zone, which turned out to be a rift into the dark ether. The entity spoke to the strike team and had them power various altars, which eventually culminated in another ether worm called Gormgant spawning in to take advantage of the high concentration of Ethereum energy. Ravenov monitored the strike team, who, after defeating the worm, returned to HQ and reported this encounter with an unknown entity inside the rift. Concurrently with the strike team's venture into the Dark Ether, while recovering at the Deadbolt headquarters from her own encounter with the entity, Jansen began to look into Project Janus through means of her own, hacking into Deadbolt's mainframes, discovering Richthofen's classified Janus research from the 90s that involved various individuals, including Ravenov, the leads of Requiem, and Samantha Maxis. While doing this, Jansen suffered another bout of migraine while hearing the voice of the entity. She suddenly found that the lights in the facility had gone out. Stepping out of her room to investigate, Jansen finds several corpses laying about and noises of gunfire. She then found herself surrounded by various zombies, with the zombified Requiem leads all pointing at her as the entity whispered to her. Jansen fought back against the zombie horde with a machete, but as Ravenov called out to her, she turned back and found that she had slashed his throat. Green quickly ordered her men to arrest Jansen.
Drop your weapon! Drop it!
But this turned out to be just yet another hallucination, as Jansen remained in her room, briefly possessed by the entity, as she whispered how they
You will never be alone again. We will be one.
As her eyes glowed purple once again. Jansen snapped out of the hallucination as Ravenov called her via phone, informing her that the strike team had returned from a brief encounter with the entity in the Dark Ether dimension.
Jansen, this is Ravenov. The strike team have returned from the rift.
Ravenov?
Ava, they made contact with some kind of entity. They're coming for debrief. Report to ops.
They met... what?
An entity inside the rift.
I'll be right there.
Whilst him being unaware that she had been suffering hallucinations and hearing from the entity's voice just as the strike team had been contacted, indicating that by the strike team defeating the worm, it somehow allowed the entity's connection with her to grow stronger. Potentially, in the worm's feeding on the Ethereum energy, it circumvented the entity's control. After all, after the first worm was defeated was the very moment a vortex was triggered where the entity met face to face with Ava for the first time. The worms may have been suppressing the ethereal discharge, stabilizing it, in turn not allowing the entity to use it to its advantage. As she headed off from her bed, she left her laptop screen active, showing profiles of Weaver, Carver, Strauss and Gray, all confirmed to be deceased, with Ravenov's being active, whereas Samantha Maxis's states classified Janus Directive 6776D, which it then pans out to in the final moment, highlighting its importance.
Inside the rift.
I'll be right there.
At some point around here, Ravenov and Deadbolt member Hugo Barrera instructed the strike team to gather data on the Ether Storm in an effort to learn how to stunt it. To this end, the strike team acquired several flash drives from Terminus's data stations, then put them in refractors while under an active storm. This attracted another, much stronger Ether worm, this time red, Greylorm, which the strike team was able to defeat. After Fletcher learned about the Omega Group and heard whispers of the Dark Ether containing a treasure trove of goods, he assembled a team of Terminus operatives to escort him into the Dark Ether, after learning of a new rift opening in the high threat zone. Once inside, his team was quickly stranded due to unfamiliarity with the territory. At the same time, following the appearance of the first rift, Jansen contacted the strike team and informed them of the second anomaly. Ravenov opted to join the team as he was also on site at the time. Fortunately for Terminus outcomes, Ravenov followed Fletcher and the squad of Terminus soldiers when entering the anomaly, and was later joined by the strike team in the Dark Ether. Fletcher got in contact with Sergei Ravenov and the Deadbolt team, who followed them in pursuit. Both sides agreed to a truce and worked together to escape the Dark Ether. They found pieces of Jansen's neutralizer and reassembled it in order to open another rift. Fletcher, however, betrays both Deadbolt and Terminus Outcomes mercenaries by using an Ethereum vial to transform his men into zombies, slowing Ravenov and the strike team and facilitating his own escape. And just like Zakhaev and so before him, that is the last we hear of Fletcher in the main story.
Thanks. Couldn't have done it without your help, Deadbolt. Sorry to disappoint, but, it'll be a while before I get the inside of that group.
This isn't over, Fletcher. You do not understand the forces you are playing with.
After this event in the Dark Ether Rift, Terminus Outcomes never bothered to investigate it again, instead focusing all of their efforts into extracting Ethereum and defending against Operation Deadbolt. At this time, they also employed a new commander to further bolster their rank, Rainmaker, a Cuban who has a liking for explosives and traps, who builds a fortress located in the Shahin Manor. Meanwhile, Ravenov and the strike team managed to return safely. As Ravenov was tending to his wounds in the Deadbolt headquarters, Jansen confronted him on his affiliation with Requiem, demanding him to reveal the truth about the fate of its leads.
You were part of Requiem.
Yes.
What happened to them?
Maxis sacrificed herself to end the outbreak. We promised we would find a way to rescue her. And when we failed, it was a blow. Some of us took it very hard. We vowed never to let this happen again.
Ravenov allowed her to tend to his wounds and briefly mentioned that Requiem attempted and failed to rescue Samantha Maxis from the Dark Ether following her sacrifice in 1985.
What I have to do. I'm sorry. This is the only way.
Jansen pressed him on the purpose of Requiem's Ethereum research and also expressed how it doesn't make sense how he has such good genes, as he joked, and how he is in such good shape despite fighting zombies 40 years ago.
So you're 0 for 2 on those promises?
But I am still here, am I not, Dr. Jansen? I am still fighting.
And here's the thing, you shouldn't be. That was 30 years ago, look at you.
I have good genes.
Oh, that's a crock and you know it. What was the focus of Requiem's Ethereum research?
Dr. Jansen. Ava.
Ravenov stopped her mid-sentence and promised to tell her more about the old days after resolving the current outbreak. Jansen stormed out of the room, declaring that she would find answers on her own. Once alone, Ravenov quietly remarked to himself that Jansen's parents were proud of her, as the camera panned to a screen of the Requiem head statuses again, this time with an enlarged shot of Samantha.
They are. Oh, they are so very proud of you.
Slowly, the entity began to take over Jansen's mind, manipulating her further, which was made easier due to her anger and enragement with Ravenov, causing her to become distracted during Deadbolt's briefing sessions. She was eventually lured by the entity. Jansen was subsequently reported missing, and later found entering a third rift in Zaravan. Ravenov and the strike team pursued Jansen into the rift, and witnessed as the entity possessed her completely, claiming that they have been restored.
We are restored. We remember.
Dr. Jansen! Stop right there! On me! On me!
The darkness denies you.
You're over here! I got you!
You can run,
Contact!
but where you go, I am everywhere.
Unleashing zombies on them. Regardless, the strike team and Ravenov are able to survive and break her free of her control, repelling the entity and rescuing Jansen. Later back at HQ, Ravenov scolded and reprimanded Jansen for blindly and recklessly pursuing Grey's research, but decided that with her meeting the entity head-on, it was time to finally tell her the truth. By finally showing her the recording from the late Dr. Elizabeth Grey from 1996, before the Requiem Head's deaths. In the recording, Grey detailed the nature of Jansen's birth, revealing the truth. While she carried and birthed her, it was merely through surrogacy, and her biological mother was none other than Samantha Maxis, currently, as far as we're aware, still trapped in the Dark Ether.
One day she went into the Dark Ether and didn't come back.
Whose DNA, alongside Ravenov's, with or without their consent, was used to create her by Requiem. Grey says that her and all of the other ex-Requiem heads are dying due to the Dark Ether exposure and could not continue their work, and that Sam was exposed more than the rest of them, explaining that
This is why you are so important. You are bonded to the Dark Ether. It's in your genes. No one knows whether that could be something wonderful or something dangerous.
She says that Sam was the
kindest, bravest soul I have ever met.
Whilst they're dying, she says,
but we can ensure that someone will watch over you. We agreed Ravenov would be the best choice, especially given his connection to you. I know the Jansens will have given you the best life, but giving you up at only 3 years old.
On the recording, she says,
I am so sorry. I'd like to hope there's a part of you that will remember me.
After she is gone, to which Ava says,
There is.
Before Grey says,
I love you, Ava. Goodbye.
Whilst it is unclear why the characters then go on to sacrifice their lives, judging from the fact they chose Ravenov to look after Ava, and the fact Ava and lots of other characters in the story have been repeatedly pointing out how good Ravenov looks for his age, and how healthy he is. In 2021 it would make him around 70 years old, but he certainly doesn't look it. It's very well possible that they gave up their essence to allow Ravenov to live longer.
Thanks to others, I am a survivor.
There are 2 vials missing after all. Maybe Ravenov took one, but if so, it begs the question, who took the other? It's also interesting how the Ethereum was killing them, and yet they may have managed to develop technology to allow it to do the complete opposite. But after all, zombies do live practically forever, being the undead, and time passes slower in the Dark Ether, so it is very well possible that it can have 2 drastically different effects. And Ava specifically was even looking into the Dark Ether for the purpose of advancing medicine. What better medicine than this? Following on from this, Ava frustratingly says to Ravenov,
How could you not tell me the truth?
To which Ravenov reveals that the entity is her dark shadow created the moment she was, a physical, breathing bond with the Dark Ether, a living gateway. She is her mirror, her reflection, just as the Dark Ether reflects our world.
The entity. It is a reflection of you. A shadow, born the same moment you were. And every time the veil between this world and the Dark Ether is lifted, its influence grows stronger. Please, you need to let me help you.
Angered at the revelation of being lied to, Jansen lashes out at Ravenov for hiding the truth from her, claiming that he doesn't care about her as his own child, while showing disgust towards Requiem for creating her. She says,
"My father? Do you even think of me as a daughter? Or am I more of a liability?"
Ravenov explains how Requiem's DNA was taken with or without their consent, and he
did not choose to be your father.
She then storms out once more, despite Ravenov calling out for her.
But Ava! I'm sorry.
Following the brief bond between the entity and Ava, and then its separation, it causes an unstable rift to appear with relentless hordes of the undead. Jansen eventually reconciles with Ravenov and convinces him to join her in a final rift to destroy the entity once and for all, and stop the incursion completely. The strike team joins them to help, and enters a new rift appearing in Opal Palace. Here, the strike team assists Jansen in performing rituals involving several relics from Jansen's childhood, helping her to recover her memories, the memories of which the entity shares due to her watching over their lifelong bond. Jansen cleanses these relics, freeing them of the entity's grip and severing their bond. She repeatedly begs her little sister to stop.
There is comfort in our union. There is safety here. We are begging you, stop.
Stating that forces in the realm want to harm her due to her powers, but Jansen refuses, as their shared bond puts her world at risk from the Dark Ether. After finding the entity's home, she decides to force her cooperation and kill Ravenov and the strike team. But Jansen uses her powers to weaken her, and the team are able to attack her weak spots. Despite its pleas, Jansen and the strike team combine their efforts to destroy the entity. In her final pleas, she warns Ava that
Little sister, he is searching for you. The Shadow Smiths will take you.
it would seem as though the entity was never evil by nature, and in actuality she was trying to protect Ava from worse forces at bay the entire time, albeit in a terrible way by sending hordes of zombies, but I digress. Dark Ether entities may not always have the brains. After the entity's death, a more powerful Echo was spawned in the Dark Ether, a clone of her memory. When the strike team enter, it guided them with secret markings to its lair, where it attempts to kill them. However, the strike team were able to destroy it and end the entity's threat for the foreseeable future.
Хорошо. Is it over?
Yes, I think so. I can't hear her anymore. My mind is so quiet.
We can celebrate back at Deadbolt HQ. This place is starting to unravel.
Our bridge is gone. I can feel the Dark Ether starting to peel back from our dimension. We have to go now.
With her death, the Dark Ether forces begin pulling back into their own world, and the Zakhaev outbreak ends shortly after. They then leave and return to Deadbolt headquarters for hopefully the last time. The outbreak zone collapses, and Urzikstan goes back to normal, when in 2022 it becomes a war zone. On May 22nd, 2022, Soap, after long since disappearing from the zombie storyline, was deployed to Zakhaev once more, accompanied by operators Hammer and Void to investigate a chemical bomb threat in Popov Power. Despite their attempt to defuse the bomb, it was too late to be stopped, and the operators had to escape before the bombs detonated. With unknown casualties, later, Soap learned that there were additional bombs placed in Tokyo and Paris. 3 months after defeating the entity, Jansen tries to take a vacation as Ravenov recommended her to, but she couldn't stop focusing on Project Janus. She decided to learn more about them by travelling to Liberty Falls, the small town in West Virginia where the outbreak happened in 1991. Having rented a hotel room, Jansen starts to sort through a Janus dossier that she came into possession of. Ravenov calls her, checking up on her, to which she answers,
"Ah, checking up on your daughter."
I wanted to say hello. To ask how you are doing.
implying their relationship has healed and Ravenov now wants to be actively involved in her life instead of just from afar. She lies to him by reassuring him,
I'm on my best behavior. Promise.
As she flickers through a bunch of scattered documents laid out all over her bed, Ravenov says,
It has taken a while to process it all.
to which Ava jokes about,
Process it all. Who are you and what have you done with Ravenov?
As she opens a file, fully readable documents are revealed, which hold possible significant importance. There is a blueprint of the Wonder Wharf, implying Devahite's and Kraft's research and artifacts have been in Janice's possession for a long time, and potentially the Wonder Wharf has even had some nifty upgrades. In fact, at some point, potentially even after Vanguard's conclusion, Gabriel Kraft encountered ether nests, heavily infested areas covered by cis and toxic gas. He documented these nests in records, which were used as references in 2021 by members of Operation Deadbolt, who encountered similar nests created by the Dark Ether incursion in Urzikstan, meaning Kraft may have still been encountering Dark Ether elements years after. A recounting of Miller's experience as a child on Liberty Falls during the outbreak, and the names of multiple characters tying into Black Ops 6 are shown, as they are connected not only to Project Janus, but to Eddie himself as well, which he also has an image of in these documents. These names include Security Chief John Blanchard, who is the Janus security detail that Richtofen rescues in the Liberty Falls intro cutscene and orders to call in a response team.
Blanchard, secure the command post. Call in response teams. Get Liberty Falls locked down. Copy?
Copy.
He is who we will be communicating with throughout the main quest on the map, as he is currently camped out in Richtofen's hilltop mansion above the town, and he is of course who interviewed Miller, Dr. Modi, Althea, and finally Pericles Panos, one of the Janus lead scientists who could be the person who gets teleported away in the Liberty Falls intro cutscene and warns of the outbreak and something wrong with Sam to begin with.
Secure your staff. I'll handle Sam myself.
As Ava continues chatting on the phone with Ravenov, he asks,
What are your plans? What is next for Dr. Jensen?
She glances by the mirror in the room where an ominous, shadowy figure wearing what looks to be a cowboy hat and a coat appears menacingly as she walks past it, not noticing. Ava goes to the window to look at the view and tells Ravenov,
I tried the whole vacation thing, I really did, but I needed to keep my mind occupied. I kept thinking about Miller's report. I'm visiting the site of the localized incursion she survived as a child. Liberty Falls is even more of a one-horse town than I'd suspected.
As she throws the documents back on her bed, Ravenov suddenly panics and tells her to leave immediately, but it's far too late. A hand begins reaching out through the mirror as an amalgamation of disembodied voices is heard. The chorus chants,
It is not safe. Are you there?
Who momentarily reaches for it, believing she sees and hears her mother, Samantha Maxis. Before it suddenly drags her in through the mirror into presumably the Dark Ether. The scene zooms in to the Liberty Falls painting in the room, displaying the text, "One visit and you'll want to stay forever," leaving a distressed Ravenov screaming her name on the other side of the phone call.
Ava! Ava!
The bombshell of Ava's birth sheds significant light on Project Janus. While many in the community believe Ava being created is the main reveal, considering the god Janus is depicted as having two heads, one looking forward, one looking back, and is the god of gateways, of which parallels Ava and the entity having two heads, one in each dimension, and she is a living gateway after all. However, whilst this is true and could be a part of Janus, I think it is just one of the many angles of Eddie's schemes. The big question is, why did Richtofen have Ava created? We know he requires a giant gateway for Janus, so could it be that because she's a living gateway to the Dark Ether, her existence is what breaches the Dark Ether on Liberty Falls? That would seem odd but possible, although it does seem that Sam, S.A.M, causes the outbreak. We also don't know when she was conceived. Whilst you would think because she was born in 1993, we can assume she was conceived in 1992. But with her being a supernatural birth tied to the Dark Ether, for all we know, the pregnancy period could take a lot longer. And maybe she was even in an incubation period long before Grey even became a surrogate. We of course know the Dark Ether breaches occur in February 1991 to start off the Black Ops 6 zombie story. But could that have been down to her being conceived or something else? Such as Sam? Also, whilst Ravenov says their DNA was taken with or without their consent, which implies he never consented, we are unsure if Samantha or Grey consented. If they did consent, did Richthofen inform them of his plan and what her purpose is? Does it have something to do with trying to rescue Sam, or maybe creating a powerful Dark Ether being to fend off a greater threat? Grey and the rest of them are of course seeking revenge for what Richthofen did to them, and with Peck's help, trying to find his coordinates in the Terminus quest.
Go locate the landing pad. Peck, Strauss, hold up in the guard station. I want Richthofen's coordinates.
But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the DLC, we end up working with Richthofen, considering he was taken into probably the Dark Ether, and maybe they could come to empathise with him throughout the DLC due to Weaver accidentally burning his family to death. When the characters learn that too, they're surely going to turn an eye to Weaver. We know Sam, of course, was in the Dark Ether at the time of her birth, so her DNA was probably extracted whilst she was interrogated in Block 8. The rest of Requiem's could have been extracted during Black Ops Cold War, or whilst they were imprisoned, tortured, interrogated, and experimented on during imprisonment on Terminus Island. The when is probably not that significant, although it would affect how much Dark Ether exposure they had. The fact they specify Requiem does imply the former though. The most plausible idea for why Richthofen had Ava created is that he didn't need her for any particular purpose, but she was more so just a byproduct of a test, with it being very likely that part of Richthofen's plan is he wants to somehow find a way to restore his wife and son. He might have started performing cloning tests, Ava just being one of them. He could have merely been testing the Dark Ether's abilities to clone living humans, as so far we've only ever previously seen it clone the dead, all beings in the Dark Ether, but not living beings from Earth. But Barrera does start to realise its potential in the radios in Modern Warfare 3. Richthofen probably wants to clone his family and bring them back, and she might have just been an experiment as to the plausibility. Maybe Richthofen never even knew or meant to create the entity, it could have been merely an accident for all we know. With Richthofen even creating an organ-solid Ethereum breeder reactors for Terminus Island. Whilst this seems to power the map by breeding Ethereum crystals and could be similar backstory for the Tempest, this technology could be a trial run for him wanting to clone his family and may have actually been how Ava was created. We see chambers filled with zombies he's been experimenting on and had created on Terminus. These devices surely have to be for more than just power, considering the parallels with Ava seemingly being forcefully created. Richthofen has been up to some freaky shiz. During the final fight against the Entity insists that she is protecting Ava from other forces, specifically a group called the Shadowsmiths, a new group we have not encountered yet in the story, specifically saying, "The Shadowsmiths will take you, Ava," and that he is searching for her. So what does this mean for Black Ops 6 exactly? There's so much we could theorise here, but one thing is for certain, the Shadowsmiths are likely an antagonistic faction that we may have to confront either during or even after Black Ops 6. This also opens the door to the possibility that time travel might be a part of the storyline again, as many have speculated that this shadowy figure, a Shadow Man if you will, let's call him that, drags Ava through the mirror and could be taking her back to Liberty Falls during the initial outbreak we saw started by Sam in the intro cutscene for the map. If we take the text under the painting literally, could this figure be the return of the Shadow Man last seen in Black Ops 4? I find it unlikely considering he was supposedly in the summoning key in the Broken Cycle when Nikolai destroyed it, but I guess it is possible he somehow survived, but I wouldn't jump to conclusions just yet. As far as we're aware, the Apothecans and Keepers restored their duality and have merely fragmented across the Dark Ether, further corrupting into many of the creatures we see today. Whilst much of the past is starting to return, I don't know if Treyarch want to repeat a villain again, and in my opinion, I think it's more than likely that this is a new character and faction entirely. Maybe similar to the Shadow Man, but not him directly. The fact they're referred to as Shadow Smiths, being plural, definitely suggests it as a new group, and one of many. And with them having a name different to the Shadow Man, makes me feel they are brand new and maybe just look similar as a red herring, similar to when we first saw the silhouette of the entity and assumed they were Sam. Trek likes to troll us a lot, after all. With the cowboy theme of Liberty Falls 2, he may be somewhat related to the town. I find it fascinating that there was an amalgamation of whispers that sounded like Maxis or the entity, along with a severely burnt hand that reached out, which appears to resemble Sam's clothing before she entered the Dark Ether, her purple jumper. It looks practically the same. Did this shadowy figure trick her by pretending to be Maxis, or was it Maxis reaching out before the Shadow Smiths pulled her in? With the Dark Ether being capable of cloning, there's no way to know for certain if this was Maxis herself or a copy, but like I've stated, as far as we're aware, her whereabouts are currently unknown and classified under Janus. Interestingly enough, it says 6776D, whilst this could just be her code number or something unrelated. Many have speculated that this could actually be a reference to a date, potentially the number of days she was last seen in the Dark Ether, which would be around 2003 or 4, or could even be the date she escaped, if she actually has unknowingly to Ravenov. Whilst I think it's possible she escaped, I find it unlikely that it would have occurred between games and then not be seen at all, so I think she's likely still in there. Also, considering the fact that this number appears in 2 cutscenes where seemingly days have passed in between and the number doesn't change, implies that probably it has nothing to do with numbers or a date. So I'm not sure what this could actually be a reference to, but what theories do you have or what you think it means? Honestly, probably it has no real importance, but we'll have to see. If the arm is actually real Sam, then this could give credence to the time travel theory. Potentially she started the outbreak in 1991, grabbed Ava from the future, and pulled her back after the very moment she takes Richtofen. However, I have my own theory. What if this cutscene isn't time travel at all? I find it very unlikely that Trek will bring time travel back to the story, as the whole point of Black Ops 4's ending was getting away from the convoluted mess created by time travel, and they now want to tell a more linear, easier to digest story for now. Instead, what if the events following Black Ops 6 are directly tied to the Shadow Smiths and Ava, instead of anything involving Maxis or Liberty Falls from 1991 specifically? If the Black Ops 6 story wraps up relatively quickly, within around a year or 2 or maybe a little bit more, like Black Ops Cold War, then maybe the story leaves us on a cliffhanger setting up the threat of the Shadow Smiths, where it then skips over the stuff that happens in between, with Ava being created, her birth, and the characters then dying. And maybe this was all done intentionally to try and prevent the Shadow Smiths. After all, the entity was stopping them from taking Ava. The Dark Ether has been mostly severed from the world, so potentially in the sequel to Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, we could get a game that takes place entirely within the Dark Ether, which would address the common criticism that the Dark Ether story is too boring or simple due to its ties to the campaign, having to keep everything quite self-contained. Both Ava and Ravenov could then be the main characters in this game once again, with potentially some other familiar faces. I wonder if my theory is correct that Ravenov has been given extended life. Could Richtofen have taken the other vial and still be alive today and one of the main characters in this sequel too? There is a rumour that there's another Black Ops game in 2025, and maybe instead of a game set after the events in the 90s, we have a time jump to after Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, or this era is saved for a future game even beyond then. This game is rumoured to be a Black Ops 2 sequel, which would put the dates around 2030, and while Zombies used to in the past be set in completely different eras to the campaigns, I'd assume that Zombies would be set around there, similar to how Modern Warfare 3, whilst it's not taking place exactly when the campaign takes place, it's just a couple years prior. There is the possibility as well that maybe COD 2025 just continues directly on from wherever Black Ops 6 leaves us, and then we have a continuation directly of that story spanning over 2 years instead of just 1. But like I said, it seems that recently they've been trying to keep all of the modes set around the same eras. However, it is rumored that Avalon is going to be the Warzone map for next year, which was supposed to release with Black Ops 6, and apparently it's not just going to be in Warzone, but will be in Outbreak in Zombies as well, and we'll also see Round Base back. And obviously this map was built in the 90s, with many of the multiplayer maps even taking place in it, so it wouldn't fit in with that era. So it is very well possible that maybe the campaign is just taking place in a different era to Zombies, or they just repurpose Avalon to be set closer to the near future. Only time will tell for what's next after Black Ops 6, but I think we should wait for us to get this game first. It'll probably then give us a better idea of what is happening next. But I'm sure at some point in time we are going to see a follow-up to whatever happens in Modern Warfare 3, whether it is in 2025 or beyond is currently unknown. I find it incredibly odd that Ravenov was left behind in modern times. It seems like a connection that's begging to be continued in future games. I am honestly very surprised that he survived to the end of the story, considering it was implied many times throughout the game that he would die, with Ava even hallucinating killing him being the biggest one.
Drop your weapon! Drop it!
I wonder if Ava, being in the Dark Ether, now becomes corrupted and could even kill him in the future, if we see them both back in a future game. Or maybe instead we could get a fully Dark Ether version of Avalon so they don't have to worry about the era, if my theory of a fully Dark Ether game is correct. Although it seems like Ava might be in Liberty Falls in the Dark Ether, but maybe she actually gets taken all the way to Avalon, which is located somewhere in Europe. Maybe we could even get a Dark Ether Liberty Falls Outbreak version next year, which would be so ironic with everyone complaining about the vibe and atmosphere of the map right now. The mystery surrounding why the Requiem heads die is also very important. It seems that they at least partially made the choice to do so, given the fact we see the device in the background of Gray's recording. Her, Strauss, or someone else probably had a hand in its creation. If my theory is correct that it was all just to allow Ravenov to live longer,
my expertise came at a high price.
I still feel there has to be more to it than just that. I wouldn't be surprised if Richthofen has had some sort of involvement in this event, convincing them to go along with it. Maybe the device was even a way to try and rescue Sam, but we know they failed. After all, the device looks very similar to the Dark Ether portal that she was sent in by Peck on Firebase Z, a minute version of it. What if Richthofen convinced them this is how they rescued Sam, but it went wrong? Or maybe Richthofen had no involvement and it was Sam herself, now corrupted by the Dark Ether, tempting them to try and save her, but she betrayed them. Or could it even have something to do with the Shadowsmiths? As I mentioned before, maybe them killing themselves somehow created some sort of lock sealing them away, or maybe it was done to seal the entity away, or potentially even both. But Zakhaev stealing the vial broke the lock. Or maybe this has something to do with the old ones, as it seems they are returning in some way, as Weaver has been having tons of visions of them, and has been etching in symbols on his prison wall during his time on Terminus. Maybe they corrupt him and eventually get them to free him by the end. What if the Shadowsmiths are actually a faction of these old ones? In fact, on Weaver's prison cell, etched in, also seems to be some sort of talisman. This kind of looks like a skull and crossbones, and maybe this could even symbolize their sacrifice ritual, with the skull representing the device in the middle, and the four bones being each of each other around the table. That is a lot to digest though, and there's literally so many possibilities for what this could be, why they did it, who they did it for, how many players were involved in the event itself, and outside forces, both on Earth, Richthofen, etc., or entities in the Dark Ether, the old ones, the Shadowsmith, Samantha, the entity, etc. But the question is, are they permanently dead? It does seem awfully odd that Treyarch would spoil this big revelation for probably Black Ops 6, and then not follow up on it with some sort of twist. Maybe they are able to return in the sequel, or we do something in Black Ops 6 to change this event. In the room, like I said earlier, there is a Cerberus wonder weapon which contains the AI of each of the Requiem heads, so I wonder if that AI could somehow transfer to their bodies, allowing them to come back. Or maybe the Dark Ether even clones their AI and somehow allows it to merge with their bodies, and it then controls them. In fact, the motto for Requiem is Vicurimus Mortem, which means to have conquered death, which does suggest that they may return, and Requiem itself in Latin means a mass of the dead. Richthofen specifically of course chose the name and handpicked all of the heads, almost as if he knew what was going going to happen, as he played everything like chess in Black Ops Cold War, and maybe, just maybe, he always intended for Requiem to be imprisoned and eventually die for an unknown purpose. If he did play a role in this, does he also need them to return? In Vanguard, we learn masses of the dead weaken the Veil, explaining the outbreak. In addition, in a radio, Ravenov says,
"We feared something like this would happen. And that is why I stayed here, always watching. Yet I was unable to stop this catastrophe. Perhaps I was not the one who needed to stay behind."
Implying that Requiem still exists, because he's saying stay behind as if they are somewhere else. So maybe somehow when the Requiem heads sacrifice their lives, they are in some way now inside of the Dark Ether, whilst he stayed in the real world. Their souls may now exist in the Dark Ether for an unknown reason. After all, the Dark Ether is basically hell. Maybe they put their souls in there to try and find Samantha, and maybe they tried or already failed to find her, or maybe they went in to try and find Richtofen's family if he had them do this, or for some other reason. Ava did hallucinate seeing the Requiem heads as zombies as well, of course, and that could have been their souls reaching out just as the entity was. Maybe they've even formed some sort of amalgamation in the Dark Ether, all merged together, as we've seen with many of the creatures from the Dark Ether, such as literally the amalgamation itself we see on Terminus. How did the Forsaken know this would happen too, and know it would happen if defeating him? In this foreshadowing, Samantha seems to be in the background again, implying that maybe they did in fact die at the hands of her. She could now be one of the most powerful Elder Gods in the Dark Ether after all. And like I say, maybe throughout Black Ops 6 they were contacting her, thinking they were trying to save her, thinking she was good, only for her to be long since corrupted and backstab them at the end. Could that even be what Ravenov referenced when they failed to save her? Or is that a separate event entirely? The fact we collect Elder Sigils in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies as well to access the Elder Rifts does imply the entity could be an Elder God even. And after all, Elder Gods are just powerful Dark Ether beings, whether originating from there or not, so she fits the definition. Speaking of the Forsaken, something massive that I haven't mentioned is that he does seem to be the announcer voice in both Black Ops 6 and Modern Warfare 3 Zombies.
Insta-kill. Double points. Insta-kill.
I have no idea why this is the case, but it surely has to be important. Is he able to control the zombies from within the containment chamber? Has the Dark Ether just cloned his voice and it's actually not him? Has he managed to escape from the containment chamber? So many questions, almost too many, and that seems to be a common theme of this game. There's just too many questions, like I was just proposing a billion questions why the characters died. It seems a bit overwhelming with how many questions we have. Another interesting point is the background that we actually see behind the shadowy figure in the mirror, because it looks to be Liberty Falls, but not part of the map we play. In fact, with us knowing that Richtofen's mansion is actually based on the real-life hilltop house in Harper's Ferry that the town is based on, it looks like we see the mansion in this shot. As if we compare the real-life location, the dome-shaped top looks very similar, and we see this same dome-shaped building in the distance of Liberty Falls behind the church. I wonder if Ava could have even been taken to Richtofen's mansion specifically. Richtofen similarly was teleported within his mansion. Could they have ended up in the same place? I wonder if there's some sort of time skip at the end of Black Ops 6, Richtofen gets sent into the future with them then both together if he wasn't the person who took the other vial. This is even more evidenced by the fact the hotel Ava visits seems to be the exact mansion Richtofen was, because the mirror she is taken in by seems to be the exact one in Richtofen's bedroom, potentially even the same room itself. The mansion could have been transformed into a hotel after the collapse of Janus's operations here, especially with the real life location being a currently non-in-use hotel. If the mirror is too, showing the outside of this building, that is interesting though. It could just be foreshadowing that this shadowy figure is moving closer to the building within the Dark Ether, as when she is actually taken, we no longer see the same buildings in the background, indicating it may have made its way directly into the room. Ava could now be in the Dark Ether version of the site. If it is the very same room, this would give even more reason as to why there is such a Dark Ether weak spot here, allowing the Shadowsmiths to take her. And Ava, having the Dark Ether running in her blood, allows the veil to weaken, Richtofen and her to be taken. Either way you look at it, whether you believe this is time travel, a closed time loop, or any other theory involving outlandish claims, this ending is undeniably crazy. We can be certain that Ava and the Shadow character will be major components in either Liberty Falls during Black Ops 6 or the game that follows, as we know Trek will likely continue to lead zombies for each installment. Speaking of Richtofen, earlier I alluded that there have been more powerful people at play in the background of Modern Warfare Zombies in setting up Deadbolt and approving Ravenov, and how he was given authority to do basically anything, whilst the others did not have such leverage. These orders came from the White House themselves. I've speculated before that Richtofen or his son Samuel could have even actually been the president themselves given this fact. I'm less convinced now that it's come to the end of the game with no mention of it, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. The White House has been involved with Requiem since the beginning, with Reagan approving and literally establishing them, and with Richtofen controlling lots of high-up officials in government, it wouldn't be beyond Janice's power to have himself or someone for him to be planted in power to do all and any of their bidding. Until any further clues though, I think it's unlikely, otherwise it probably would have been revealed in this game. But like I said, just keep it in the back of your thoughts. With most major implications out of the way, or at least those that could span multiple games, we can start discussing the smaller details we've gathered from Modern Warfare Zombies that hint at possible character motivations or storylines. The most paramount, the importance of Miller. Throughout most of Modern Warfare Zombies' story, as I explained, it is shown that many past events, those that transpired during Black Ops 6, and whatever occurred in between leading up to Modern Warfare Zombies, still haunt several current characters. Ava, Ravenov, and Miller are prime examples of this. Miller grappling with what happened at Liberty Falls, and Ava being connected to Project Janus and the ever-mysterious entity. According to various intel pieces released throughout each update, and as I introduced at the start, Miller was actually involved in the events at Liberty Falls during the initial outbreak. Her family died during the Dark Ether incursion that occurred there, and she lived to tell the tale. In the recordings, we hear her recounting the events, with various location names mentioned, such as Ollie's Comics and the Motor Lodge. Additionally, we get a mention of a potentially important gang of bikers known as the Steel Mountain Riders, who are likely the same ones who rode the Bloodburner bike pre its Dark Ether encapsulation, a connection that is also part of the description of the Bloodburner keys. This group are the ones who rescued her during the outbreak. Could we see a character who is part of this biker gang? Perhaps Carl Hoover, a name data miners discovered a while back linked to the bike.
Things aren't looking good for old Carl.
Despite the lack of mention since then, many consider it to be the identity of the owner of, or even the name of the Bloodburner bike itself. If Carl Hoover is the name of the bike itself, I wonder if we could see this bike playable before the Dark Ether corrupted it on Liberty Falls, or, wild theory here, but maybe Carl was one of the bike members who then got transported or merged with his bike when thrown into the Dark Ether, similar to the Decimator shield in Vanguard. After all, there does seem to be some sort of language on this bike, and it seems to speak to us.
Faster! Kill! Goddamn tires are bald. I'm riding on rims!
Implying it's alive? This bike existing in Modern Warfare Zombies, seemingly from this bike gang from Liberty Falls that somehow got thrown into the Dark Ether, is very interesting. I have no idea how it ended up so far away, but that's the Dark Ether for you, I guess. There is, I guess, even the possibility maybe the Steel Mountain Riders are the Shadowsmiths. They got corrupted by the Dark Ether, explaining why they're wearing maybe similar cowboy hats. That could be their origins, but I've got a feeling the Shadowsmiths faction might be something entirely new and some sort of group that's existed for a very long time in the Dark Ether, considering the fact that they are so powerful, way more powerful than the Entity it seems, and the Entity's been around since the 90s. If they've been around for the same amount of time, surely they wouldn't be more powerful. So yeah, there's many possibilities for who the Shadowsmiths could be. They could be the Shadow Man, they could be a new faction, they could be the Steel Mountain Riders. Now, while I doubt we'll actually see Miller when Liberty Falls finally drops, it's possible we could learn more about her during the Easter egg. We might even play as members of the Steel Mountain Riders during the outbreak, considering we know they're apparently not Janus operators, but imposters, but that seems very unlikely given the fact that they are of course just bikers and not military operators, so I doubt they have anything to do with them. But I definitely think we could see members of the Steel Mountain Riders during the Easter egg. Maybe they could ultimately help on the quest, and then save Miller after the main quest of the map is completed, which then of course we know they take her to safety to Blanchard, who subsequently interviews her. The Freedom Fried Chicken restaurant is located on the Rewind multiplayer map though, implying we won't see her on the map, but I'm sure we'll hear of her in the intel, unless unless there's another one of these restaurants in the Zombies version 2. Or we could help Miller to get out of the town itself, and then she makes her way over to the rewind section a bit further away, where there is the mall, and she goes into the chicken restaurant. Moving along to our villains. Setting aside Zakhaev for a moment, as he was a throwaway character, we should instead focus on the secondary antagonist, Jack Fletcher. His history and record are intriguing, especially because of his investment in harvesting Ethereum to sell to clients he somehow found. His service record is also oddly too specific to be unimportant. Specifically, there's a notable entry in his service record. In 1991, he was seconded by the CIA to operate under the New Zealand SAS Regiment for Terminus Island Security Detail, like I mentioned before. We know, of course, that Terminus Island is one of the launch maps for Black Ops 6, and that the security guard was killed by Maya during Peck's bailout of the Requiem department heads. This begs the question, will Fletcher appear in some capacity during the map's main quest? Perhaps even an intel piece, if not outright. He obviously survives, but his record also indicates that he was honorably discharged post-operation in 1993, which could mean that the island continues operations even after Requiem escaped containment, but what for? Why else would Janus need the island afterwards? And if he was sent there during our time actually in the quest on the map, that would be interesting, or is he only sent there after they actually escape, because they then have to start some new operation following their escape and whatever they do during the quest? Either way, that's all of the loose ends, and that's the entire storyline of Modern Warfare Zombies explained, or at least the important parts. What did you think of it? Personally, I think it provides a lot of mystery for Black Ops 6 and beyond, but leaves way too many questions, like I mentioned before, and there's too much untapped potential, with most characters aside from Ravenov and Ava being completely uninvolved or generic. It's been fun theorizing for a year, but I wish that this concept got the full required resources to be properly fleshed out, and I also wish that once the mysteries are answered, most noticeably, who are the Shadow Smiths? Why did Richtofen have Ava created? Where is Sam, and why did they fail to rescue her? Why did the characters die in Urzikstan? Are they able to return? Where is Richtofen? Is he still around in the background? Etc, etc. All of these questions must be satisfying, because in retrospect, this entire story is just set up at nods, and if these mysteries are all underwhelming and all fall flat on their face by the time they're revealed, then all of this build-up will have just been for nothing. I'm confident that at least a few of them will hopefully be intriguing and surprising, but part of me does worry that A, some of these may never even get answers, and B, some of the answers might be underwhelming. A lot of them need to be answered. I'm fine with a few mysteries, but we have too many questions now. It makes my head hurt. I can think of 100 off the top of my head, which I've gone over most of them in this video, and you can see there's just way too much to consolidate properly. I also wanted to create this video as a way to throw out a lot of these theories since Black Ops 6 is right around the corner, and let me know your thoughts in the comments, and maybe I can make a video in the future discussing some theories you have and breaking them down, although we're very close to launch, so we'll have to see. I have mitigated some information from this video, even though it is still very in-depth, since most of the side characters, like I said, are basically irrelevant to the bigger picture, so I didn't think it was worth delving deep into them. Lastly, I want to give a big thank you to the Call of Duty Wiki that has helped massively in creating this video, as I've used a lot of their summaries of the characters as the building blocks for this comprehensive script. A link to them will be down below, of course. And in this video's description, I'll leave a link to my video of literally every single cutscene from Modern Warfare Zombies in order. I would definitely recommend watching it after you are done watching this video, if you haven't done so already, as a good way to consolidate everything, even if you haven't played the game itself. With that said, I will be posting an entire Call of Duty Zombie Story Explained video soon, from Ether to Dark Ether, adding in this Modern Warfare 3 section, and adjusting some parts from my old Ether, Cold War, and Vanguard full story videos with new information. So I will see you very soon on that extremely long video. Thank you for watching, and I'm excited for where the storyline heads in Black Ops 6.